So one thing we're working through is how to represent the relationships between these walks within these categories. As you can see, obviously right now, they're just presented in this big scrolling list with categories, which is fine. And I think we do want to keep this UI just because it's very easy to browse. But we also do want to represent the different kinds of relationships that these walks have to each other, to the user. And what makes it a bit tricky is that these related walks are going to have different kinds of relationships to each other. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So in this scale category, for example, these three walks, the deep ocean, layered earth, and solar system, have a nested relationship. So I've drawn a little diagram to kind of make that clearer. So ideally, we would want to nudge users, maybe not require them, but to kind of encourage them to do these walks in a specific order. Because if they did the deep ocean, which represents basically the crust of the earth, before doing the earth, then when they got to the earth walk, we could say, hey, you remember that 6-kilometer walk you did that represented the ocean? Well, all of that is now just 1% or 2% of the walk that you're about to do. And then once they do the earth and they do the solar system afterwards, we could say to them, hey, do you remember doing the earth walk? Well, all of that is just 3 millimeters or 5 centimeters on this 1-kilometer walk that you're about to do. So you can really bring home the sense of scale if you kind of nest walks that way. But that's not clear here in this category, this way of categorizing it. Another very different set of relationships can be found in this tree of life category, which has not just the 4 life on earth walks, but also walks that represent all of the major lineages on the tree of life. Now, these are also obviously just here presented in a list, but ideally we want to show users what it looks like when they are mapped out onto the tree of life itself. Now, this is obviously a much more complicated representation, of the tree, but you can see here that we've got mammals and reptiles over here and plants down here. This visually just makes it clear where and how and when these lineages emerged in the history of life. I've got a more stylized representation here. This one goes vertically. And again, all these yellow highlighted lineages are ones that we, I think, plan to write walks for. So it'd be useful for this to come up somehow, maybe in kind of a game map format here, kind of showing maybe which ones that users have completed with a check mark beside them, or badges, and so on. So a third kind of category has walks that are not necessarily related at all. Well, the ones in the time category might be, but for example, here in the social category, these might just be history walks or, walks that show, for here, Jeff Bezos' net worth or whatever, and they don't need to be represented in any way. So I think that's, again, kind of speaking to a little bit of the complexity here where we've got different kinds of relationships that we would want to make clear to users in these different categories. So one kind of suggestion or idea was whether to have a description come up as you're browsing up top, maybe a button on the bottom that appears in the different categories that has different kinds of maps that it brings up. Maybe in scale it brings up a kind of nested map, and in the tree of life it actually brings up a stylized version of the tree of life. Either way, this is something that we are actively kind of thinking through